Happy Thursday morning, Bama fans. It's an exciting day on the calendar for Alabama fans every year because even though there's a sad element to draft day for Bama fans, as you're saying goodbye to some of your best and favorite players, you're getting to see them have extraordinarily good news and have a happy ending to their story of their college career. And it's also become a very busy weekend for Alabama fans every year. Ben, I can remember, it doesn't feel like all that long ago, that it would be a pretty big deal for any Alabama player to be picked in an early round. And we, in fact, had a draft, the first one after Nick Saban arrived at Alabama, where there were no Bama players drafted. That has not been the case for a very long time, and hasn't even been the case that it's been close.
Yeah, it's really embarrassing for everybody else, Matt. ESPN or somebody shared a stat recently that showed like the number of first-round draft picks that Alabama has had the last, I guess maybe during the Saban era compared to, second place. It was a pretty wide margin. I'm just joking. I mean, because like you said, it wasn't always like this, like we're here to talk about our favorite players to watch in the NFL. And for a long time, it was slim pickings in some respects. Like I remember, I grew up in Tuscaloosa reading the Tuscaloosa News, and every Monday they would have, or Monday or Tuesday, inside the sports page, they would have this little graphic that was like how Alabama's players did in the NFL on Sunday. And it was like just a few rows, and now it's like, if you want to check every game on Sunday and Monday, you're going to like have to dedicate like an hour or so to like, just scouring through the numbers and seeing how everybody did. And like, shout out to Alabama Pro Updates on Twitter. I mean, if he didn't exist, then I don't think there's any way we could keep up with it.
Well, we'll get into that part of it in a minute, because I do think that's become a part of being a Bama fan now, is that Sundays are a lot busier than they used to be. But before we do, just want to talk really quickly about our draft coverage here, wherever you're watching us, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, and over on AL.com as well on our website. We've got a ton of draft coverage coming, your standard pick-by-pick stuff, but also some really cool special stuff as well. If you check over, especially on our YouTube channel, you'll find our Road to the Pros series, where we've been going in-depth with Najee Harris as he's been getting ready for the draft. We've also got draft profile videos on basically every single player that could be drafted from Alabama this weekend, broken down by one of their former teammates, Mac Hereford. And all of that coverage, plus our show today here on Bammers, is brought to you by our friends at Milo's, an Alabama institution of its own. So enjoy some Milo's as you do your draft watch party tonight. But Ben, what we're here mostly to talk about today is specifically our favorite Bama players to watch in the NFL, and we want our viewers to be a part of this discussion as always. And just as we've been talking at the opening of the show here, there has been an explosion of comments already from some of our viewers. Some shout outs to Derrick Henry. We've got Henry Ruggs being mentioned already. We've got Eddie Jackson. We've got a Joe Namath out there who was a Bama favorite in the AFL back in those days. So tons of names being thrown out already from our viewers, and we want you guys to keep those coming in as we continue our discussion here. But we're going to give you some of our picks for our guys that we love watching every Sunday. And it really been, I mean, I don't know how, look, everybody sort of watches the pros differently. I didn't grow up as an NFL fan, so I still really don't have a habit of like sitting down and watching a whole NFL game. But my Sundays have really in the last few years become this sort of rotation of you just sort of watch the highlights roll in on Twitter. And it's just, I mean, there are moments where there's Bama players scoring touchdowns in what feels like every single game that's being played at that time.
Yeah. It's like I said before, it's hard to keep up with. Like I mentioned, looking at that graphic in the Tuscaloosa News, like I couldn't wait to see, because I mean, I wasn't reading like ESPN.com box scores yet, or I wasn't like checking my app on my phone. Those things didn't exist. And so I had to depend on the print product to see, how many tackles D'Amico Ryans had that Sunday playing for the Houston Texans, how many yards Sean Alexander had. And obviously guys like Joe Namath and Kenny Stabler are a little before our time, but we understand the history and sort of what they mean to the greater context of the NFL and the success that they had. But now it's just like it's an embarrassment of riches. I'm telling you, I joke that it's an embarrassment for the other teams, but it's really an embarrassment for Alabama fans. We often talk about how often we take it for granted as a fan base, how much success they've really had. But when you look at the numbers all added up, like how many Alabama guys are in the NFL or have been, especially these last part of 15 years now, it's unbelievable. Alabama has just kind of taken over. And this narrative of, Alabama players being busts in the NFL was always one that was funny to follow on social media, which has been proven to be untrue over and over. And now that Alabama may have 3 starting quarterbacks in the NFL next season, that narrative is just like blown to smithereens at this point. And it's just been so fun to watch these guys flourish at the next level, like so many people thought that they probably would.
For sure. And there will be another crop coming in tonight that has very high expectations for them and will be a big part of some NFL offenses really going forward. I mean, some good defensive players in this class too, but I think that's been kind of the most surprising element of it, Ben. I think we all knew early on in Saban's time that there were going to be lots of great defensive players graduating from Alabama into the NFL, but now it's become the offensive side of it. And to be honest, the way that the game has moved, that's where you become a big superstar. It's where you become a household name. And, there's so many receivers in the NFL now that came through Alabama, so many running backs, obviously. Quarterback is kind of the next frontier. We'll see what Tua does in the future. We'll see what Mac does in the future. But let's start going through some names that we had that we wanted to highlight. Give me your first one that you want to talk about, Ben.
So I'm going to knock out a bunch just in one fell swoop, and I'm going to talk about the Washington football team's entire roster, a third of which is made up of Alabama players, it seems. Not quite a third, really, but and they've lost a few. I think Sean Dion Hamilton, who was there last year, moved on. Ryan Anderson, I think, moved on to the New York Giants, I believe. Where I thought he was going to play with Dalvin Tomlinson, but he went to the Minnesota Vikings, got paid there. So Alabama players just keep moving around the NFL at this point. But Washington is still kind of a haven for a bunch of them, including one of my all-time favorite players, Jonathan Allen, who is doing very well as a defensive line fixture for them. I think they just secured Deron Payne with a new contract for a number of years. Those are guys who are Pro Bowl potential players who are obviously amazing at Alabama, but it's just really cool to see them playing on the same line professionally now and being very productive too. That's a line that I think that is pretty formidable at that level. Then you have guys like Landon Collins, who suffered an unfortunate injury last year, but he was just always a guy. He would fill up the stat sheet sort of uniquely, I think, for his position. He became one of the best safeties in the league when he was on the Giants and then moved to Washington. So we hope he gets healthy and plays well again. But you've got receivers like Cam Sims, who fought for a roster spot and secured one. Robert Foster, I think, went over to the Washington football team too. So it's just amazing to see Alabama players just wind up on that squad. Washington, I guess, watches Alabama football and likes what they see and are happy with the production that they've gotten from them. I think Reuben Foster, who's a guy that we talked about last week, may still be on their roster. I'm not totally sure about that, but he's
always a little up in the air. Yeah.
Yeah, he was on there too, and I know that Alabama fans would like to see him come back and do well. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, like if you want a quick check to see like how Alabama players are doing in the NFL, you can always just click the Washington game, and you're going to see some Alabama players in action.
Yeah, for sure. There are a few teams that seem to really favor Alabama and go that direction pretty regularly. You'll see them go through phases of it. I mean, honestly, Tennessee has taken quite a few guys from Alabama, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. But we saw them in addition to Derrick Henry, they've got Rashaan Evans is a major part of their defense over there as well now. So there's some teams that I think more reliably lean in the Alabama direction. Honestly, not too many anymore that stay away from Alabama. There were a few that were kind of known for avoiding Bama players, Philadelphia for a while and
Denver
Miami
for a while.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we've seen that dam start to break even with those franchises as well. So Charles Haynes wants us to send him some Milo Sweet Tea to Hayward. Is he saying Hayward, California? I don't know if it's made its way out there yet, but I mean that tea probably ships well. If you are a generous person, reach out to Charles, ship the man some tea. So yeah, let's do another one here as our fans continue to roll in their feedback here with Mac Jones as a top 10 pick. I mean, I think that's probably going to happen tonight. We talked about it on a couple of other shows this week here, but I think you're going to see Mac in the top 10 for sure. I don't know how early, but we'll see. Ben, any other names you want to mention right now?
Oh yeah, quickly. I'll keep it on the defensive side of the ball. Alabama has these defensive backs who, like I mentioned before with Landon Collins, just fill up the stat sheet. It's not just tackles. It's not even just interceptions or pass breakups. I mean, these guys get sacks, force fumbles, recover fumbles, and most importantly, score touchdowns. So guys like Eddie Jackson on the Chicago Bears, somebody who was an all-pro. Guys like Minka Fitzpatrick, an all-pro for the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously for the Miami Dolphins first, somebody who came in and just changed the landscape of that entire defense and the AFC to a degree. Marlon Humphrey on the Baltimore Ravens. These guys are so productive. And again, these were all Pro Bowl caliber guys, again, who we in Tuscaloosa and in Alabama obviously thought could have those types of careers. But if I'm going to single one out, I mentioned Eddie Jackson. I mean, what an entertaining player at Alabama. His career did not end the way that he and others wanted it to, with him suffering a leg injury that ended up keeping him out of that national championship game against Clemson that Alabama lost. But man, he just recovered and he turned into a superstar player for Chicago. I mean, this guy, again, defensive backs are not supposed to score touchdowns at the rate that Eddie Jackson was there for a while. So like when you're watching his games, like you really have to focus in on him as much as you would the skill players on the other side of the ball. He's just that much of a ball hawk and that much of a playmaker. So great to see him having the success that he's having. He's just so much fun to watch.
For sure. I think the special teams aspect was always fun to watch from Eddie Jackson at the next level. But he was, I mean, really all of that 2016 team where it just felt like they scored, they were outscoring the offense in certain games that season. And Eddie Jackson was a huge part of that, just such a dynamic player and probably one of the most dangerous guys to be throwing against. But I think you mentioned the amount of defensive backs that have become prominent in the NFL out of Alabama. I think in some ways, Patrick Surtain, who's coming out this year, he has not gotten as much talk among the Alabama fan base, in part because nobody threw at him, because he was extremely good at his job.
That's why he's about to be perhaps a number 10 pick to the Dallas Cowboys, is because nobody wanted to throw at him. Yeah. He's just one of the most solid players, I think, in recent Alabama history. I mean, when the team is scared to throw in his direction, or when they do, it either is an incompletion or it's an interception or a pick six, then you've got a star player. So he's going to go high. He's quiet. He goes about his business very quietly, but the results speak for themselves, and I expect him to be announced tonight.
A question from our viewers, Charles Haynes asking. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a different question I was trying to get to, but yeah, Charles bringing up the best sweet tea he can get in California is at Chick-fil-A. So
we'll get you some sweet tea. We'll get you some sweet tea.
I hit the wrong button there, but please, someone get Charles some sweet tea.
Golly.
Rayhan wants to know if Devonta Smith's size will affect his production in the NFL. Can he perform as well as he did at Alabama? I'll point you to a story that actually came out today in GQ. If you go over to GQ.com, really good feature story that went up this morning about Devonta, and specifically talking about the physical stuff and how the writer of this story talks about how he shows up, he meets Devonta, and he's kind of a scrawny looking guy. And then you see him operating in the weight room, and all of a sudden you get it. You understand why he's as dominant as he is. I think it's deceiving because we're used to seeing guys at Alabama look bigger, more physically imposing than everybody they go up against. And Devonta was able to dominate despite not being bigger than anybody he went up against. It's just purely his understanding of the game, his skill at the position. He definitely is elite in terms of his speed, but I think also he's deceptively athletic from just looking at the guy. I mean, all you have to do is go look at that LSU game this past season. That performance, he's physically dominating the guys who are guarding him. It may not look like he's throwing people to the ground, but he's doing things physically that could not be stopped.
Look at every game. The LSU game, sure. The LSU game before that, he killed him in 2019 too. Look at every game, I would say, except for the Arkansas game, but he had a punt return for a touchdown in that game too. So, I mean, you won't find a more productive player in the history of college football. So I don't really understand. I mean, I guess I do understand it because, I mean, like, there's so much time between the end of the college football season and the draft for fans, for analysts, for journalists, for, scouts and folks in the NFL to pick these guys apart and to analyze everything they possibly can before they can actually see what they do on the football field. So, I mean, Devonta Smith is going to get drafted. He's going to get drafted high, and I think he's going to be a successful NFL wide receiver. I mean, like, if he can dominate the way that he did against the SEC during 2020, which was an all-SEC schedule, so we're not talking about the quote-unquote cupcakes people are used to seeing three times a year against Alabama. This was all SEC defensive backs who are going to be playing in the NFL. So if he can do it there, he'll do it at the next level too. We've seen it too many times, especially out of Alabama the last few years, especially with his teammates and guys like Ruggs and guys like Judy, and we'll see Waddle too. So yes, Devonta, like, I think I heard Saban tell this story recently. He was asked obviously about his size, and Saban said when they recruited him, they wished that he was 10 or 20 pounds heavier and had more muscle on him, but the results spoke for themselves. He was just that much better than his competition.
And he's been doing that since he was a true freshman too. I mean, obviously everybody knows about the national championship game, but I was recently went back and saw the play, the game-winning touchdown basically that he had against Mississippi State when he was a true freshman. And it's a play where he did have to deal with some contact and he had to brush off multiple defenders, and he just sees the field better than everybody else, and his brain is similar to what folks say about Mac Jones. Devonta is seeing and understanding what's happening on the field at a faster speed than anybody else that's out there. Speaking of physically imposing wide receivers, though, Ben, we got to talk about Julio Jones for a minute. He's in the news actually today. There's a lot of chatter about Atlanta possibly considering trading Julio and kind of giving themselves a reboot as a franchise, but just without knowing anything about what's going to happen there. I mean, Julio has been, I think, a big touchstone for Alabama fans watching the NFL over the last 10 years.
Yeah, and it's been so fun to watch him in the NFL because he's the player that I think so many people thought that he would be when he came to Alabama, or that he could be. That's not to say that he had a disappointing career at Alabama. He obviously didn't. He's beloved and he's one of the all-time greats. But he played for a team that was very structured around the success of the defense, and was a very balanced offense in terms of being run heavy with Heisman winner Mark Ingram. The next year with Ingram and Richardson again, and that compared to now, when you have this pass first offense under folks like Steve Sarkisian and Loxley and Alabama just airing the ball out, you have to wonder, how would Julio Jones have done in this style of offense? I think we all know the answer to that. And so when he got to the NFL, when he did play in offenses like that, he dominated, and he continues to dominate in a way that people consider him one of the all-time greats at wide receiver in the NFL. We're not talking about Alabama anymore. And he's must-see television, especially when he's healthy. You know, Julio has struggled with injuries here and there, but what's so impressive about him is that he plays through the pain. I remember back during his NFL combine performance before he was even a rookie in the NFL, I think he may have had like a break in his foot or something, like a broken foot, and he still just put on an insane show at the combine to show what kind of pro that he could be with all the measurables that NFL scouts desire. And that has proven to be true at this level. He's amazing. I mean, you just tune in and this guy, it could be, a 200-yard, 3-touchdown performance, but he's just somebody who commands so much attention, and that leaves things open for his teammates like Calvin Ridley, who's another really productive receiver in the NFL. But a lot of that is because of what Julio Jones commands. So he's somebody, if he's on, you got to watch. If he's on national television, or if you've got NFL Sunday Ticket, you're probably watching Atlanta because you want to see Julio Jones play.
Yeah, Greg Thomas bringing up that he dominates the NFL the same way he did at Bama. And I'll say if you're from the part of the country where Greg is from, Julio has been kind of at least a regional legend since he was in high school. I mean, he was doing stuff in 7-on-7 tournaments when he was in high school that people would. I mean, this was back before social media too. So I'm dating myself, but I can remember getting emails from folks with pictures of Julio Jones at 7-on-7 tournaments when he's 15, 16 years old, and you're watching him. You're watching him dominate guys. You're seeing his feet, off the ground at sort of peak elevation when he's going up for a ball. His feet are up to the other guy's shoulders in the photo. You're thinking, this looks Photoshopped. This looks impossible. So he has been, I think, nobody remembers a time where they were aware of Julio Jones where he was not the most physically imposing person on the field. And he continues to be. I mean, he's now, I think, verging into what we would call veteran territory in the NFL, and he still looks very, very difficult to defend.
Yeah, he's a freak athlete who's good at everything, right? Like,
yeah, he could be a dominant safety if he wanted to be.
I was going to say that, Matt. Like, one of my favorite things about Julio Jones that I've seen is like when Matt Ryan throws an interception. If Julio Jones is in the vicinity or not, he will likely make the tackle, and he'll do it as well as any safety could in the NFL. I mean, there have been plays when I think he chased a guy down like roughly 70 yards, or at least like part of the length of the football field, and Julio Jones makes that play. The guy's just a great football player.
Absolutely. I'll throw another receiver out there just real quickly before we move to another position, and that's Amari Cooper, who I've really enjoyed watching in the NFL. I feel like he's been, he had that thing at Alabama where he was really quiet, just in terms of his personality, in terms of off the field. He was kind of known as being a guy who was just really focused on what he did and getting better at it. And, I don't think he was obviously still a dominant player at Alabama, but I don't think he quite got the hype at Alabama that some other players have gotten. He was still kind of on the early side of Alabama becoming an offensively oriented program. But you look at what he's doing in the NFL, and it's not like he's playing at a place where he's got the best offense in the league. It's not like he's on a dominant Super Bowl caliber franchise. He's at a franchise that, like most in the NFL, they've got some positives, but they struggle a lot too. And Cooper is I think the star of the show when he's on the field for Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, man on man, more often than not, Cooper's just going to be better than you, just as a superior route runner and just dependable guy. I mean, he's one of my all-time favorite Alabama players. I mean, you go back and he was Devonta Smith before Devonta Smith, right?
Yeah, very good comparison. Yeah,
he showed you that a wide receiver could be the fixture of the offense. You could build an offense around a wide receiver the way that Lane Kiffin did in his first year as offensive coordinator at Alabama. And Amari Cooper made a splash as a freshman, did very well, won a national championship against Notre Dame and got better as the season went on, had an injury-plagued sophomore year, but then his junior year, he was arguably the best player in the country. And it was just amazing to see, especially as somebody who grew up watching Alabama, to see a wide receiver featured in the way that he was. He was dominant.
Very fun stuff. So let's we got to talk about running backs, Ben. And there's been a healthy string of them that's come out of Alabama that are still actively playing in the NFL. Who are the guys that you've had the most fun watching at that level?
I mean, there are two guys who are the most fun to watch in the NFL. I mean, for me personally, Mark Ingram was always a major favorite. I mean, we've talked about him in terms of his place in history as Alabama running back, obviously the first Heisman winner in program history, a national champion, one of the most competitive guys. But that translated at the next level. It didn't immediately when he went to a pass-first franchise like New Orleans, where you've got Drew Brees who can just sling it all over the field. He's sharing carries with guys like Pierre Thomas and other folks in that backfield. And so he's not the featured back that Alabama always saw him to be. But when he did get his opportunities, he was very productive. I think he had one or two Pro Bowl seasons for New Orleans. And then obviously when he went to Baltimore, very productive, went back to the Pro Bowl, scored a lot of touchdowns, had I think at least in his first season, I think he had 1,000-yard rushing year. And he seemed to get better as he got older. And now he's 31, and he obviously didn't have as productive of a season last year. And everybody points to the whole, running back thing, the short-lived careers of the running backs, especially once they get in their 30s. You mentioned Julio Jones, who is, I believe, the same age as Mark Ingram. And now I believe he's going to be playing for, remind me where Mark Ingram is, the Houston Texans, I think is where he ended up. And so not as good of a team, obviously, as New Orleans or Baltimore. So I don't think a Super Bowl is in his immediate future, which is something I know that he would like to win. And he almost helped Baltimore win recently. But, nobody's going to work harder. He says he feels great. And I know that I'll want to watch Houston Texans game for the first time since I can remember now that Mark Ingram's on the team.
William says he wants to see an all Alabama offense before it's over. I will tell you, probably your best potential opportunity could be coming in Miami fairly soon, where you've already got Tua. But Miami, there's some talk out there because they have multiple first-round picks. There's some talk out there that Miami could end up taking one of the Bama receivers and Najee Harris later in the first round. So that certainly would probably be as close as you'll get to seeing it if that ends up happening. But we've been posting our Najee documentary all over the place all week, and every time we post it, Dolphins fans are jumping in our mentions saying, "We're come to Miami, be a Fin."
The Eagles too, man. I mean, Jalen Hurts is presumably going to be the starting quarterback. The coach would not commit to that. Obviously, coaches, sometimes if they don't have somebody who's just a totally proven commodity or a future Hall of Famer, they won't do that. But we think Jalen Hurts will be the starting quarterback in Philadelphia. And I've seen on some mock drafts that Devonta Smith, for whatever reason, could fall as late to 12, which I think is where Philadelphia is picking. And so you could have Jalen Hurts teaming up with Devonta Smith there in Philadelphia. That would be very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, look, these receivers between Waddle and Smith, they've played with basically what's about to be 3 NFL starting quarterbacks. So they've got some options there in terms of continuity. One last name that I definitely, we'll have some others that we can throw out here, but I know we got to talk about Derrick Henry. I mean, he probably right now in terms of airtime for Bama players in the NFL right now, I don't think anybody gets as much as Derrick Henry. He is the offense for the Tennessee Titans. He is what that entire franchise is built around right now. And really the only comparison that somebody my age has in terms of Bama players in their prominence on an NFL team is Shaun Alexander when he was with the Seahawks and was the NFL leading rusher for one season at some point. I want to say it was around kind of the mid 2000s when that happened. But there was a period of time where Shaun Alexander was a national household name as an NFL player. It's very, very tough to get to that level, even if you're a great player, even if you're an all-timer, an NFL Hall of Famer, you still don't necessarily become that household name. And I think Derrick Henry, if he's not there yet, he's getting there. He certainly is in Nashville.
He's must-see television, appointment television. I mean, if I ever make the mistake of missing Derrick Henry on, Sunday Night Football or something, I'll check Twitter and he'll be trending, obviously, for embarrassing a defensive back with a
he's a gift machine.
Yeah, or running, another 99 and probable 99-yard touchdown. I mean, Matt, I know you're not the biggest Batman versus Superman fan, but like the biggest comp that I can think of is like Doomsday in that movie, right? Where he just
good.
like keeps getting meaner, keeps getting bigger, keeps getting stronger. That's Derrick Henry.
It's a good comparison too, because Derrick Henry's style as a player is that sort of just repeated pounding.
Yes.
And for people our age, Ben, who maybe bought the Death of Superman comics back in the day, that was how they introduced Doomsday, as just a big fist pounding through metal over and over and over again.
Let's keep it Batman versus Superman, Matt, because I know you're a big fan, but
that's how he runs. It starts out. You watch Derrick Henry in a game and you think, well, we've got this guy under control. We have a good plan. He's only getting 2-3 yards a rush. And it's when you get into the third and fourth quarter where suddenly your guys don't have him figured out anymore. And he starts getting loose in the secondary, and it's a nightmare all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of running backs, the more hits they take, I mean, it might weather them a little bit. It might slow them down. It's not the case with Derrick Henry. He gets worse if you're a defender as the game goes on. I mean, also as the seasons go on too, Matt. I mean, this guy just keeps getting more more productive. I mean, if you look at his trajectory, right? Like in 2017, he has 744 rushing yards. 2018, he has 1,059. The next year, an all-pro year, and I believe he was the rushing title, like he was the rushing champion. He had 1,540. Last year, the man has 2,027 rushing yards. So it just keeps going up. I know for him too, I've seen interviews with him. His standards keep going up. He wants to do more than that. It's hard to do more than that, obviously, but if you want to doubt Derrick Henry, I think it'd be like trying to tackle Derrick Henry in the open field. I do not want to do that. I don't think many NFL defenders want to do that. So again, must-see television.
Averaged 5.4 yards per attempt on the ground last year, which is not good if you have to play against that. That means he's going to get a first down on second down every single series. So they haven't figured him out yet. They figured out a way to stop the Titans in the playoffs. Some teams have, but nobody's really figured out how to stop Derrick Henry yet in the NFL.
Yeah, it sounds like Tennessee figured out to just give him the ball and get out of the way, right? I mean, that's something that Alabama has obviously always joked about, is run the dang ball. And that's certainly not the mindset that a lot of NFL teams have. But when you have somebody like Derrick Henry, you give him the ball. And I mean, like, the guy is enormous too. What is he, like 6'4", 6'5", 2, Lord knows what?
He's in the 230 range. Yeah, I mean, he's physically a linebacker.
I mean, he's a tank that goes 1,000 miles an hour. And like, if you look at like his long runs of each season, this is a huge man. And he had in 2017 his long run was 75 yards, obviously a touchdown, 99 yards. I think in a Jaguars game where he threw one defender off of him after another. The next year, 74 yards. Last year, he had a 94-yard run. So these are things that are not supposed to happen, but Derrick Henry keeps making them happen.
If you get bored in the offseason, by the way, go follow Derrick Henry on Instagram. And his Instagram feed is mostly the most ridiculous workout videos you've ever seen in your life. It'll be Derrick Henry like standing on a yoga ball or something, one foot balanced with the other off the ground, and he's like, lifting weights, and someone's hitting him with with like a punching bag, and there's some kind of rubber band holding him around his midsection. It's ridiculous. He is challenging every individual muscle on his body somehow as he prepares himself in the off season, and whatever he's doing seems to be working. But
which Rocky movie was it, Matt, where it's like one of those famous training montages, and either Rocky or Apollo or Clubber Lang or somebody is just doing sit-ups, and there's a guy there, and he's just whacking him with his he's punching him in the abs with his arms. It's just like that's the kind of thing Derrick Henry is doing right now.
Yep.
He's getting better, and he's getting bigger and faster and better than you.
It is. It's pretty. Look. I just need to let everybody who's not on YouTube see this. But the Buff Kobe says my workouts are better. Says I'm bigger than Henry. So he's got a big opinion of himself, Buff Kobe. We appreciate you jumping in here today, and maybe we can get you and Derrick to do some side-by-side competitions at some point.
Hey, man, I believe him. Do your thing, man.
Good for you, Buff Kobe. Well, yeah, Ben, we're excited about the draft tonight. I think it should be a fun night for Bama fans. Again, all of our draft coverage this week sponsored by Milo's, our friends with elite level burgers, chicken, whatever. Sweet tea. Our friend out in California misses the sweet tea desperately. So everybody, definitely please enjoy some Milo's tonight as you watch the draft. But also come back here. We're going to have lots of video footage, lots of highlights as these Bama players get picked up in the draft. Tons of coverage. And next week, if you tune in on this channel, wherever you're watching, you will see hopefully a very exciting moment as we're with Najee Harris tonight. Our documentary team is with him. They'll be with him the moment he finds out which team he'll be playing for in the NFL. So some cool stuff coming your way next week on that front too.
Yeah, and just to plug that further, Matt, great job by our colleague Wes Siner and team that created that documentary series. But the latest episode features former NFL running back and just all-around legend, NFL or not, Marshawn Lynch. So you got to go watch it. That guy, again, you talk about must-see TV. Marshawn Lynch is must-see television. So, and he brings it in this Najee Harris documentary. So go watch that.
Fun stuff on there. Well, thanks to you, Ben, and thanks to all of our viewers today for contributing. We had a lot of participation today, which we love to see. And join us again next week on Bammers.